Today we're going to explore the investment in AI and whether or not this is orientated towards making explicit the command economy of our production as credit instruments. And so if you have never thought about the way how you produce yourself as a credit instrument or as a consumer, the finished product of civilization, then that's all we do. We explore these questions to give a nuanced look at what's occurring now and ultimately an out for ourselves. So hopefully you find something thought-provoking. We can look at the development of AI in reference to our money making or the calculative logic. So I've touched upon the way when Heidegger talked about calculation is not thinking, but he did not connect calculative logic in reference to money as a tool for thinking. So if we understand that when we use money we discount, that's the way how that money, if you're looking at theories of money, there's a present discounted value of money. So in order to establish rates of return or the calculation in reference to investment, you have to obviously discount the present value in order to model, say, returns in reference to what would be the risk profile of certain ventures. But the issue with understanding money as a tool for thinking is that the discounting, what we would say would be the present, say, value of money, is actually discounts the agency a person is credited when they're given as a demand center or given as the principal product of our civilizational domain. So we could say that, you know, the theories of money, or when we use money as a tool for thinking, it discounts people because the agency remains the same across any kind of time period. And so this is the issue. This is a frame of reference when we're looking at investment per se, but in investment in AI in particular. So we could say that the development of AI, the rollout of it, is caused by our money making, and even the way how artificial general intelligence is marketed is somehow some threshold moment. We have to read that in reference to that. If calculation is not thinking and the investment in AI is beholden to the same calculative logic, then any offering of intelligence is in reference to ultimately an intelligence that doesn't think. And that ultimately reflects upon us when we use money as a tool for thinking, because we cannot presence life other than the way how it's given as marginal. So that's the thing that we need to really look at. So then we have to understand that if we are given as interchangeable economic units or demand centers or credit instruments, where we're credited demand, and so therefore the economic activity is based upon that. So all of this money that's pouring into artificial intelligence, we could say represents an investment, is sold as somehow being an investment in the future. It's a leap towards unprecedented productivity and knowledge. But maybe we can read the capital investment is a capital flight into an asset that's going to be utilized in a completely different way. So not for the thing that's ultimately been sold. And everybody's getting an inkling of that, but we're going to explore it obviously in a little bit differently. So the way out that we look at it, there is the slight difference. The picture that emerges is that AI is not an investment in human potential, but it's the primary investment vehicle for the restructuring of what is being a command economy. So we are commanded to produce ourselves as the credit instruments that we're given as. And the reason why we can say that is that, and you only have to ask the question, do you have a choice in the way how time's given to you? So if your time is given to you as marginal because you see it as a value proposition, well, that means the value proposition is in reference to the life that you're orientated towards. Now, what would that life be if the way how that you're orientated towards life marginally means that you have to economize? You have to economize independent of the interaction that you have with other people because your time is primary, because it's marginal. So, but you invest it with a value, but through being sold on life being marginal, you discount the production process, which is transcendent. And that's what turns you into a credit instrument, because ultimately through being sold time is marginal, the whole system markets back to you a credit that you need to use, which is money as a tool for thinking your life. And so the cost of living as a credit instrument that you're given as, which is not What you think it is, it's the opportunity cost of your economizing actions because you're not credited creativity. So we can say if you don't have a choice in the way our time's given to you, that's implicit. We make it true. We don't realize that we're commanded to produce ourselves as the credit instruments that we're given as, but AI will kind of, through this progression, through this transitioning, it will make it explicit. So that's why we can say that that capital flight, the capital that's been invested in there, is seeking a refuge in a productive capability, but not as in productivity in reference to the economic system as the way how it's given now. It's what comes post the redundancy of you. All right, so the system is pivoting towards that. So you're a credit instrument and you're credited demand, obviously. But so you need to change that credit instrument in something that's more amendable to ultimately what is required when you don't have the economic multiplier that is driven by demand. So if you're given as a demand center, you're going to make the transition into a node of compliance. And so AI is designed to manage that transition, but it will sell you on all these wonderful things, but ultimately we only have to look at Palantir and AI and its development in reference to total surveillance to get a graphic illustration of that. Everybody is aware of that. And so that what happens through that is that you become a predictable, risk-assessed node on a grid. You're maintained by a system that ultimately doesn't require you. It doesn't seek anything from you if a machine's doing it, and because the economic system's not based upon the principal asset of the consumer. So you have to look at what is the substitution. So if you produce yourself as the principal product, but then you also create the consumer vehicle, which is an asset class, it's an asset vehicle. You got to think of the way how you produce an investment vehicle that you put the self in, right? The way, and this is that because you don't understand the way how you produce yourself as a consumer, you can't separate these things out and understand the way how that they slightly differ. But it's an investment vehicle for your life. But so that investment vehicle, if you don't need a consumer when AI is going to do everything, and so that it's changing the nature of the economy. So why would the parasites that be, or the masters of the universe, invest in people? Right? They say people, but it's not. You're a credit instrument. I always say you've never been people. You haven't been people for a few hundred years. Okay, so why would they invest in people when AI is going to do it? So you can see why all that, what we would think to be is this way too much overinvestment in AI and the capability of it. It's designed for what comes afterwards. And so that malvestment is not malvestment if you realize that it's going to make the consumer redundant. And so in turn, ultimately, people are already in a state of redundancy, but it's going to make it explicit in a way where it will reveal the command economy that you had were completely oblivious to because you got sold on freedom as financial, or you conditioned your freedom through the use of a credit you did not originate. So let's look at the way the system. So you could say that the command was to produce yourself as a reliable credit instrument where you're credited demand. All right, you're credited the agency of want, so you can want for shit, and you are marketed wants. You're constantly solicited. So the next one, the new command, is to produce yourself as a compliant node. All right, you're accredited the agency to conform. And so we are sold the idea. So this is what happens. That you sold the idea that, when you understand that, data is the new oil, as it were, and it's a resource that we own, it's ultimately what we are giving of the self that allows our profiling. Everybody's familiar with this. So as a result, you're being contoured very much like Osiris in the sarcophagus that Set placed him in. So you're building your own, basically, you're building your own tomb, your own sarcophagus through psychometric profiling. Everything that you give of the self that has a digital trace is used obviously to contour you, to fit, which is ultimately, if you're looking at it, is to maintain or to contain your sovereignty. That's the question. Sovereignty is in reference to a choice. So it comes back to, do you have a choice on the way our time's given to you? That's the only choice you have to think about in this whole entire paradigm. It's the only one. Once you recognize that, you will understand the significance of your action. So what happens is that, we abdicate, obviously, our agency when we are orientated towards life marginally. And so if you think that what's that the system requires pliable units. You know, the risk of our behaviour is in reference to the agency. So it's always ensuring that you do what you're kind of told, or you do stuff in a way where you don't think. And so that requires, and that's through existential arbitrage of the risk-free proposition, because people will never risk the self beyond the totalising claim of a buyer's journey when they don't know the way how they produce themselves as a credit instrument, or why they legitimise the use of a credit they did not originate. So this is the issue. We're not even close to getting to asking these questions. Well, we are, but nobody else is. And so, you know, when you become a client, when you become a node of compliance, your credit score is in reference to, well, not if you're thinking about your credit score now, or your credit rating was in reference to the risk of default maybe on any loans that you took out. It's just essentially the change to become a node of compliance is to ensure that you're perfectly aligned in reference to the protocols of a control grid. So you can see the way how that values, when they're spruiked, is obviously, you know, you think of corporate values and the way how you have to align with values. You're aligning yourself in reference to that obviously line, that grid. But any alignment to a line, so a party line, the bottom line or whatever, it's derivative to the line of time. When you linearize time, when you spiritualize time, it's always conditional upon that. That's why you have to ask the question that we're asking: do you have a choice in the way our time's given to you? A command economy. Think of your sovereignty. So we can look at, so when you're looking at the node of compliance, obviously COVID becomes proof of concept. It demonstrated basically the ability for people to adhere to what is asked of them, and so therefore make credited through acquiescence ultimately the worthiness of them participating in life. And so that proof of concept, you could say, was a beta test for ultimately what would be coming down the pipe, as it were. So if you think of what happened there, the restructuring of the credit instrument, well, you're credited demand in that context, but you have to adhere to certain edicts in order for you to obviously exchange goods and services, all right? People who didn't obviously get the jab or anything were inhibited from that. And so ultimately, in order to comply to an edict, filtered life or public life. But public life is commercial, so they're filtering life as an economic agent, or as a demand center, or as essentially as a credit instrument. So you always have to connect this to money as a tool for thinking. All right, so because that is transcendent to the development of AI, because ultimately humans have been using money for an extraordinary amount of time. And so it's important to understand, well, how do we produce ourselves as a credit instrument, a demand center, potential compliant node in a grid? If we don't look at the ritual of our money making, or the way how we rationalise the price put on our labour, then we won't understand what we discount when we're orientated towards life as economic agents. And that would be the creativity that we outsource. Now, creativity is in reference to the self that will grow beyond the contouring that's been set for you, or that control grid. That's why the system requires people that are manageable, that don't rock the boat, as it were, that adhere to basically what's asked of them to get ahead, all right, to be sold on life the way how it's given. When people do not invest in the self the way how life is given as a buyer's journey, we're not even close to getting to that yet, then ultimately they're potentializing their agency. So what would that be? Well, you're credited demand, but now you're going to command. You're going to command the way how life is given. Now, if you command as a people, commanding has got nothing to do with some, from on high being dictatorial. It's commanding through presence. All right, the presence is the command. So you don't have to tell somebody what to do, because the presence, it's a commanding presence. It's the way how you hold yourself. Now, if you hold yourself in a particular way through, say through the spirit that you animate, and you have other people doing it, those people command in a way where other people would emulate them, because there's a spirit that animates their actions, where it ennobles what it means to be a human being. So commanding here is it's about presencing. So think of what that means in reference to presencing. If we use money as a tool for thinking, can we presence what is without origination? Or if we're seeking, compensation, So a return for our actions, then what are we animating as such? Why do we have to seek a return for being born? So through presencing, you're presencing your birth as otherwise than being the consumer that you're or the credit instrument that you're given as. So AI, when you're looking at it, it's going to reveal the command economy, but then what it is, it's the command of people against the command of like parasitic class of people. And so you literally do have the fight between, it's a spiritual war because one is going to animate what is without origination. And if you're looking at investment and money as a tool for thinking, then that's the calculative logic. You're not looking at life holistically. So when people start to look at life holistically, you cannot use money because money discounts the presencing of what is without origination, or what we would say, the word that we would use, that would be God. Okay, so in that they are absolutely mutually exclusive. There's no way that you can reconcile these things because it's based upon a spirituality, and that spirituality it's the tell is in your actions. So if you see life as for a return, then you're compensating ultimately for being born. If you want to animate what is without origination, then you are orientated towards presencing a legacy that knows no end, because it's a perennial wellspring. And so we can say that when you're looking at AI and the way how it's getting sold, and so that it's selling, say, artificial general intelligence, yet if that intelligence is beholden to calculative logic, and calculative logic is not thinking because they cannot think life holistically, then what are they trying to sell? What are they trying to sell when ultimately the intelligence is in reference to the human being or not the human being? This is the one thing, because we think we're intelligent, but if we don't realize that we're actually spiritualized time and we presuppose it to be a value and we don't question the truth claim of that, then anybody who speaks intelligence, if they've never questioned that, well then how intelligent are we as a species? If we're beholden to a religiosity, then ultimately, AI is just going to reveal or revel in a religious form of thinking or intelligence, which is ultimately not thinking, because a religiosity discounts thinking. And so therefore, if the creed that we're beholden to is a disincarnating creed, when you spiritualize time, it has its antecedents that are far beyond, they go back centuries before the development of AI, and yet AI will make explicit our unavowed utopianism, or the way how that we cannot be spatially orientated towards the market for our time. So the question of time, the way how time's given, is absolutely paramount. Do you have a choice in the way how time's given to you? Because if you question that, then that's all you have to ask. That's the only thing that needs to do in order to reveal what is basically been set in train when AI is offered, when the investment in AI is going to make explicit the command economy, and yet that command has got to do with you. You are commanded to produce yourself as the credit instrument, the demand center, to the transition to the compliant node. And it's whether or not you are going to comply with that, or you're going to animate an agency that you're otherwise not credited. And so therefore potentialize life in a completely different way. The choice is yours.